How do the contours of our mission in the arena specifically of fighting abortion take shape in our preaching and in our practical parish activity once we are serving in that capacity? Well, first of all, obviously, we have to stop the killing being done within the church. Members of our congregations are in fact living in a culture where Catholics are getting abortions at a comparable rate to any other segment of the population, and so and the people in our pews are fighting this battle within their own families and having influence over their own children, or at least trying to, or other family members. One day when I did parish work in New York City, right after being ordained, I preached a lot about abortion, and a woman came up to me one Sunday after Mass and said, "Well, Father, all this preaching on abortion, so we here in church are not the ones that need to hear it. It's the people out there who never come. They need to hear it." So I looked at her and I said, "Well then, go tell them." I said, the reason we're preaching it to you is not simply that you don't know. It's so that you can go transform the world and you can have the tools and the encouragement and the grace that you need to do that. That is what is critical here. Some people say, well, are we preaching to the choir when we consider the fact that really the more you go to church, the more you tend to be pro-life. And there's a simple explanation for that. The attitude of worship, which a person practices when they do attend church, no matter what the denomination, is the antithesis of the attitude of pro-choice. Because pro-choice is asserting that my choice matters, my will matters. Worship is asserting just the opposite. Lord, all our choices are subject to you. So it's no surprise that church-going people are going to be more inclined to be pro-life. But that's not a reason not to preach about it to the congregation, because, first of all, if we're preaching to the choir needs choir practice. They have to sing the song to the world. But secondly, it's a matter of activating them. Because if, in fact, they do tend to be leaning more in the direction of being pro-life, then they're the natural constituency for the unborn children. In other words, they're the ones most likely to respond to the preaching on this, which is not simply going to be a theoretical thing, because this is not just about viewpoints, it's about victims. It's not just about beliefs, it's about bloodshed. So it's a matter of activating the people of God to actually do something about it. That's why the pro-life inclinations of our parishioners are all the more reason to preach about it. Particularly then to equip them to deal with their own friends, their own family members who might be tempted to have an abortion, or the very people in the congregation who themselves might face that temptation. For us to reduce the numbers of abortions among our own flock, if you will, is obviously a key priority. And then to enable them to do the same in the community and to have an influence in the community. How do we do that? Well, we make it clear, first of all, that we are committed to providing that help. There are, depending on how you count them and how you categorize them, some 3,000 pregnancy centers throughout the United States. And these pregnancy centers come in all shapes and sizes and dimensions, but essentially they are centers of help, volunteers, mostly volunteers, sometimes paid staff, coming to these places to be available to those in the community that may need encouragement, may need an alternative to abortion, may need to be counseled on how to deal with the pressures of those who are pushing them in that direction. And this is one of the key points that we make, that abortion is not a matter of freedom of choice. And this, by the way, is a good soundbite to use when you're talking to people about it. It's not about freedom of choice. It's not why women get abortions. They do it because they feel they have no freedom and no choice. So the very phrase freedom of choice, when people try to start to have a philosophical argument with you or a moral debate, before you get into philosophical and moral debate about freedom of choice, establish the point that the phrase itself is simply contrary to fact. That's not why it's happening. I mean, do the people who are arguing with you about abortion really think that those who got abortions this morning, while we were having our first presentation, got up this morning and said, "Isn't this wonderful? I can exercise my freedom of choice today. I have a beautiful way to do it, packaged and bow-tied by the Supreme Court, that I could walk down to that clinic and exercise my right and my freedom to choose." That is anybody who has that idea that this is what's going through their minds and their emotions is just thinking contrary to fact. The fact of the matter is that they got up this morning realizing that they were facing the saddest day of their life, terrified, and often many of them praying, "Lord, please send somebody to tell me to stop. Get me out of this. Help me out of this. I've been pushed into this corner. It's my last resort. I don't want to do this, but I really have run out of options." Now, very often it's the people praying in front of the abortion facility who are the answer to that prayer. That they said, "Lord, if you don't want me to do this, send somebody to tell me to stop." Seeing the people standing out there at that place where she has her appointment is the sign. And we know that there are many who turn around and are persuaded to continue their pregnancy because of the intervention of those who are standing there. But imagine the fact that there are people who don't even stop. The number of cars approaching the abortion facility who keep driving right on by because they have seen people there praying. It's the answer to their prayer. It's the sign they were looking for to find the inner strength to, in fact, not do what they felt they had no choice but to do. By the way, in regard to this, I know a lot of you do pray in front of these places. One of the days when I was out in front of a particular mill in Orlando, Florida, there was this local pro-abort activist by the name of Carl who would go out to this place and he would rant like a lunatic, yelling and screaming at the peaceful, prayerful, pro-life people there, all during the time that they were praying. And he did it that day when I was leading the folks in prayer, just screaming at the top of his voice the whole time we were there, behaving like a lunatic. So when we came to the conclusion of our prayers, I gathered the people close to me to say a final word to them, and Carl finally shut up. And he came close to listen what I was going to say to the people. So I saw him standing there listening, and as I began my remarks, I addressed him. "Carl," I said, "I want to thank you for being here today." And he kind of looked at me quizzically, and I said, "Yes, you really helped us here today. Because with your behavior and your ranting and raving on the front lawn of this abortion center, you made this a very unpleasant place to come. I don't know about you, but if I were someone who had a medical appointment at this place and I saw a raving lunatic on the front lawn, I'd turn around and go as fast as I could in the opposite direction. I said, Carl, you've helped us here today. In fact, I want to invite you to come with me to all the abortion clinics that I visit around the country." And you think about this for a minute, and, you know, the peaceful gathering of people is a sign, and also the raving lunatic is a sign. I mean, if we create in front of these places a sense of disturbance, a sense that something's wrong. What do you say? If you're driving down the street, you see a group of people gathered. The first question that comes into your mind is, what's going on? There's something unusual happening. What is it all about? And, you know, Jeremiah chapter 6, peace, peace when there is no peace. That's what the false prophets do. They proclaim that everything's okay when really it's not. Are our neighborhoods really peaceful just because there aren't any bombs going off or guns being shot in the street? Or is peace lost when human rights are violated and innocent blood is shed? There is no peace as long as there are abortion facilities operating in our communities. And therefore, the people coming out and being there is creating the sense, it's actually reflecting more the reality that something here is off balance, something here is not right, and so there's a need to come out and correct it. So that the very presence save lives. Even before we ask the question of what should we say, if we have the opportunity to say something, but the very presence is assigned to those women. But back to the main point I'm making is that when we speak about abortion, whether it's in a homily or in some kind of other talk, begin by asserting that there is help available. So the church, referring to or working with the pregnancy centers around the country, is providing that help. Now, practically, in the parish and through the communication mechanisms of the church, I always urge pastors to place on the parish bulletin, not just in the bulletin, but as a permanent item on the bulletin, a telephone number and website whereby people can find alternatives to abortion. It might be a diocesan resource, it might be the local pregnancy center in the community of that parish, or it might be one of the national hotlines that you want to use, such as the option line, 1-800-395-HELP. 395-HELP connects the caller with all the pregnancy centers in the network of CareNet and Heartbeat, the two largest networks of pregnancy centers. And the caller is referred, in the space of a couple of minutes, to the place closest to where the caller lives that can provide alternatives to abortion. We say alternatives, and we need to make this clear to the people. We're talking about financial and medical assistance, legal advice, counseling, assistance to keep and raise that child, or to make an adoption plan, and any other need there may be. And often the need that there may be is not so much a financial or material one, or some complicated relational issue. It's the encouragement to know you're not always going to feel the way you feel today. Your fear is not the last word in this story. And if you bring this child to birth, there are all kinds of options in terms of who will help you and what relationships will change and how you can make this work. But if you end the life of this child, you've done away with any other option. That's never going to change. You're never going to be able to bring the child back. You're never going to be able to make things work. Sometimes it's just that's needed, the hand of a friend to walk them through the pregnancy. Now, when we talk about this, and when we put one of these hotline numbers on the bulletin or a website like pregnancycenters.org, that's the online equivalent of 1-800-395-HELP, what are we doing? Besides the obvious thing we're doing, which is connecting people with the help, first of all, we're equipping the parishioners to be that help. Because again, like that woman told me, oh, it's the people out there that never hear it, they need to hear it. Well, then you be the bridge. Go tell them. And what are you going to go tell them? What you're going to go tell them is, hey, I found out at church that there's a phone number you can call, and when your friend or your sister or your cousin or your daughter feels they have to have an abortion, call this number. You're going to find help. And I can't tell you how many people have come up to me after Masses, and I'm privileged to preach this every weekend in a different parish around the country. I listen carefully to people's reaction. And so many people say to me, oh, I always knew the church was against abortion, but I never knew how much help there was. I never knew you were so committed to providing that help. They don't know it. We have to tell them. And you see, that's the other thing we're doing. Besides actually connecting people with the help and saving lives in the process, here's what we're doing. We're changing people's perception of what the pro-life movement is all about. And that's critically important. We're changing their perception about what the church is all about. We're showing them that we're not standing before the world pointing fingers of condemnation. We are standing before the world extending hands of mercy and strength. Lift people out of despair and give them the strength to do what they know is right. Abortion is not just a sin against life. It's a sin against hope. Think of what people often say, oh, I can't bring a child into this world in my current circumstances. Into this world, as though it's such a dark place. A place where evil really does have the last word, and so we shouldn't even bring a child into this unbearable situation. It's despair speaking. It's despair. And that's why if you're arguing with somebody about this, Yes, look at the words and the concepts that are being exchanged, but look deeper at the despair. How can I lift this person out of despair and bring them hope? That's what we need to do when we preach on this topic. We're changing the perception in people's minds of what this movement is about so that they can address within their own mind and heart the fear I spoke about before. Namely, if I get involved in the pro-life movement, am I not setting myself up against people, against those, maybe in my own family, who someday, somehow, are going to feel that they need to have an abortion? Well, no, you're not setting yourself up against them. Just the opposite. You're becoming their best friend, because if they're in a situation where they do feel they need to do that, you're going to be able to lead them to better help, better options, better choices. When we're speaking to young people, I often say to them, look, the slogan, friends don't let friends drive drunk. Why not? And, they're all ready to answer that. If your friend were under the influence of alcohol and they took out their car keys and they said, I'm going to go drive my car right now, you can't stop me. It's my car. It's my keys. It's my choice. So you're going to interfere with your friend's choice? Oh, yes, we're going to take the keys away from her. Well, why are you going to do that? Because you're anti-choice? I'm going to do that because I don't want her killing herself or somebody else. Friends don't let friends drive drunk. Another time when I was out in front of one of these facilities, a car drives up to the place, and we walk right up to them before they even got out of the car. Two young ladies in the car. We asked them if they were going there for an abortion. They said yes. And the friend was driving the car. We talked to the other girl. We found out right away the problem was she couldn't find a job. That was the whole issue. We got on the phone. We called 1-800-395-HELP, connected her with someone in her community, helped her find a job. And the friend, I spoke to her, and I said, why did you bring her here today? Well, I felt I had to be loyal to my friend. I didn't want her to come here. I don't want her to have this abortion. But I felt I had to be loyal to my friend. And this will resonate with high school students, college students. Of course, they want to be loyal to their friend. But how does a friend be loyal to a friend? Not by helping them to do something that's going to damage them, but by helping them to do what's right. A friend gives a friend the strength to do the best thing for them and for others. So just like friends don't let friends drive drunk, friends don't let friends get abortions. This is a good way to explain it to young people. It's a good way to explain it to everybody. Because we show ourselves and the movement and the church to be the friend of those in need, not only of the child, whose life is at stake, but of the mom and the dad who are caught in despair. We want to lift them out of despair. The dad, in particular, obviously, we have a message for men, don't we? The other side has tried to make this a woman's issue. They've tried, furthermore, to say that the difference between the two sides in the abortion controversy is the following. We love the fetus, they love the woman. And we say the difference between the two sides is not we love the baby and they love the mother. The real difference is they think you can separate the two, and we say you can't. The destiny of mother and child are intertwined in a way that cannot be separated. You love one, you love the other. You hurt one, you hurt the other. We love them both. We call people to a love which, as the gospel and the faith teach us, is indivisible. You can't claim to love your neighbor if you don't recognize that your neighbor is a person like yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself doesn't just mean to the extent that you love yourself. It means to recognize them as a person like yourself and to not engage in the false kind of barrier building and discriminating and prejudice that will eliminate an entire segment of the human family from consideration or protection. So we are affirming that this is the movement of equality and welcome and tolerance. Roe v. Wade said the word person does not include the unborn. That's the intolerant movement. We say, yes, it does include the unborn. We want to widen, and you speak in these terms to your people, and they're going to, if they haven't already, they're going to warm to the pro-life message, because you're standing in front of them and saying, look, this movement, this church, what we're trying to say is that we're expanding the circle of welcome. We want more, not fewer. We don't want to exclude anybody. We're expanding the circle of welcome. We're calling on our government to expand the circle of welcome of those it recognizes as part of the human family. Now, we have a message to men here, therefore, because the other side has tried to say, well, it's a woman's issue. Nonsense. First of all, this is a human issue. Sometimes when you're speaking up about this, or preaching about it, or just talking to someone about it, or writing something about it, people will come up to you and say, well, you're a man. What do you have to say about this? You have no right speaking about abortion. And we say to people, well, first of all, I'm a human being. And human beings are being killed by abortion. Of course I have a right to speak about it. Secondly, if you want to talk about men and who men are, men don't stand around with their hands in their pockets when little babies are being torn apart, limb from limb. We do something about it. And the role of men in society as protectors, especially of their own family, is one that has been totally attacked and denied by the whole abortion mindset. We're supposed to just stand back and say, oh, well, this is her choice. Now, look at the dilemma that puts a lot of guys in. Because here they are, they're told by the law itself, that they don't have any kind of veto power over a decision to have their own child killed. They don't have any kind of power over that. And so, and plus the prevailing ethos of the abortion culture. And so what does that make them think? Well, a lot of them try to say, okay, well, here's the right way to do this. If this happens, she gets pregnant, we didn't expect this, we're not ready for it, I'm going to say to her, you know what, this is your decision, your choice. I'm not going to interfere. And they think that that's the best thing they can say. See how good I am? I'm not going to interfere with your choice. How do you think that sounds to the woman? How does she receive that? Now, I'm not saying how does the man intend it. He might have the best of intentions, or he's confused, he doesn't know what to do. I'm not going to be perceived as trying to force her one way or the other. You think that's good. But how does she receive it? Here's how she receives it. You're leaving me alone. That's how she receives it. You are abandoning me. You're putting the full weight of this decision, this dilemma, this problem, you're putting the full weight of it on my head, on my shoulders. Thanks a lot. I guess that means I'm going to have to abort this child because I certainly don't have your help. That's what happens. He thinks he's doing the right thing. Oh, your decision. And meanwhile, that pushes her more towards the abortion. What's going to be much more effective in that particular relationship is for him as a man to say, you know what, we got ourselves into this, we're going to get through it now. We're going to get through it, and we're going to do the best thing for you and our child. I'm going to support you in every possible way. That's the way then he gives her the feeling that, okay, there is a way through this where both me and my child can survive. And that's, in fact, what can happen. Whether they end up getting married or not, that's another question. And that has to be worked out depending on the circumstances. But certainly, he can help her to feel that there's no need to kill this child. And the men are in either in the situation where they don't want to see the abortion happen, but they're not sure how to speak up for their child without seeming to interfere in the choice of the woman. Or on the other hand, they're the one precisely pushing for the abortion. And it's sad, so many of them will say, well, either you have this abortion or I'm out of the picture. And what does abortion do? Most of the time, it causes him to leave anyway, because it has profound destructive effects on the relationship, on the ability of the two of them to trust one another, on their ability to have sexual relations with each other. Because remember, the woman undergoes the pain of that abortion. The pain physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually is very real. And one of the things that happens is psychologically, she starts avoiding sexual intimacy. Why? Because whether she's consciously processed this or not, her psyche, her body, is telling her, here's how the pain started in the first place. And so there, even if she's not fully aware of it, there is instinctively a drawing away from, what happens with a child that hits his hand burned when he touches the stove? He doesn't want to go near the stove anymore, even for legitimate purposes. So it's like, okay, I had sex, I got pregnant, I underwent the pain of the abortion is still causing me pain. Where did it all start in the first place? Having sexual intimacy. I'm not doing that anymore. The guys have a tremendous role in this. They may not have a legal right to say no to the abortion. At the same time, the influence they have is one of the single most decisive factors in whether or not that abortion is going to take place. And this is why after abortion, not only is the healing and the counseling available to the mother, but the fathers are more and more coming forward, more and more in need of the same kind of counseling with certain distinctive differences as the woman. And one of the things we do, and we'll talk a little more about the details of post-abortion healing, but one of the things we do at Priests for Life, of course, is that we run the Rachel's Vineyard ministries, and this is the largest ministry in the world for healing after abortion. It works as the Project Rachel in many dioceses. Sometimes the Project Rachel, of course, refers in a more umbrella sense to the post-abortion ministries of the church. Now, a diocese may choose to have multiple post-abortion programs, among which would be the Rachel's Vineyard, which is a retreat model, and Project Rachel trained priests who can be available on a one-to-one basis, or other counselors and counseling services available in the diocese. In other cases, a diocese may have Rachel's Vineyard retreats as its Project Rachel, and that therefore the terms would be synonymous. In fact, Rachel's Vineyard retreat model was originally written for Project Rachel and for dioceses to use. And we're finding on these retreats, one of the benefits of a retreat model, which, by the way, is not supposed to replace one-on-one counseling and spiritual direction. They're both needed, but one of the values of the group interaction is precisely that abortion isolates. That temptation I was just describing, when the guy says, oh, it's your choice, that isolation that ensues, the healing, in whatever form it takes, needs to overcome that isolation, and therefore a retreat model is extremely beneficial for that, because not only is she listening to the voices and experience of others who have been through similar pain, but the man is able to be there as well. And the healing of the couple is essential. The healing of that relationship of trust, of intimacy, of decision-making. Now, even if the woman who had the abortion conceived that child and had that abortion with another man, other than the one she's currently with, it's extremely important in the healing that the man she's currently with undergo this process with her. Why? Because it's a relational wound. Remember, it's the mistake of the other side to say that this is purely, what the words do they like to use? Private and personal. Nonsense. This is social and relational. This is an impact on all of us. It impacts every relationship she has. It impacts her relationship with her current spouse. It affects her ability to parent other children. If a person hasn't grieved the child they lost by abortion, what do you think they're going to do? If you haven't grieved, now grief is hard work, and that's one of the dimensions of post-abortion healing, is that you do the work of grief. And grief is an adjustment to a loss. There's a loss, and now you have to reorient yourself in numerous ways to living with a loss that can never be regained. How do you do that? Well, it's a process that you have to work out with the helpful guidance of other people. So grief is hard work. Now, if she doesn't do the hard work of grieving, in the process of which she has to acknowledge the humanity of that child, this was a real child, I had responsibility towards him or her, I lost this child, I was responsible for the death of this child, now, I have to move on, I have to seek forgiveness, etc. If she doesn't do all that and properly say goodbye to that child, and then be convinced that she can move on with her life. Why? Because she, although she's committed abortion, she is not for abortion. And that's a crucial thing in the post-abortion healing process for her to realize she is not for abortion. Her abortion is evil. She is not evil. She can move on. She's still welcome in the church. She's welcomed by God. She can be welcomed by others. Okay. If she does not do all that, she's still holding on to that child. And guess what that's going to do to her ability to raise another child? It's going to compromise it. Because she's not going to bond with her subsequent children as well as she would if she has properly said goodbye to the child she lost. She might seek in that subsequent child the replacement of the one she lost. She might be overly concerned that as a result of having killed that previous child, something bad is going to happen to this one, and therefore become what? Overprotective. Irrationally so. Or she may, because of, these dynamics, that she's still reacting. You don't want to raise a child out in a reactive mode to a previous act of killing a child. That's going to do damage to the parent-child relationship. If she's raising the child in a reactive mode to losing the previous one, she's also going to possibly fall into the syndrome of, this child is perfect. And has to be. Because she is the replacement for the one I lost. This child is perfect. Well, parents are obviously going to have a natural, understandable, even praiseworthy bias towards their own children and how great they are. But we're talking about something far more severe and damaging than that. We're talking about the perfection syndrome, where if she doesn't find perfection in that child, she becomes increasingly frustrated, and ironically, that's one of the psychological dynamics that leads to what? Child abuse. Back in the prior to Roe v. Wade, and during the years leading up to it, the advocates of abortion were promising all kinds of things like, this will reduce child abuse in our society. Well, exactly the opposite has happened, and the opposite has happened because, and what I've just traced for you is only one of about a dozen lines that you can trace to show that abortion actually leads to an increase in child abuse. In fact, there's a mutual causality or influence, if you will, of psychological dynamics by which abortion makes it more likely that a child will be abused, and, interestingly enough, having abused a child makes it more likely that that child who was abused is going to have an abortion. If you want to read more about this, there's a book by Dr. Philip Ney, N-E-Y, called Deeply Damaged. And he's got a fascinating study in there about these mutual dynamics, as well as an overall study about how damaging abortion is. Also, Dr. Teresa Burke, who's part of our team and founded Rachel's Vineyard, her book called Forbidden Grief. If you read those two books, you have the best understanding you can get in the time of reading two books about post-abortion damage. The best. Those two books, Deeply Damaged by Dr. Philip Ney and Forbidden Grief by Dr. Teresa Burke. And you can contact us at Priests for Life for both of those books, and we'll be glad to send them to you. All of what I've been saying these last few moments is the second big point that we bring out in our preaching on abortion. Because point number one is, hey, there are alternatives. We are here for you. We are with you. And number two is what? There is forgiveness. There is healing. And we have been entrusted with the ministry of reconciliation. That's one of the key things St. Paul and the Word of God say to us about who we are as priests. Ministry of reconciliation has been entrusted to us. That's why we address these issues. The priests who say, oh, I don't want to preach about it because it's going to hurt the people in my congregation who've had abortions, no. The silence is going to hurt them. Because if we're silent, they're still hurting, and they're going to wonder about us. Is he silent because he doesn't know about my pain? Is he silent because he knows about it but he doesn't care? Or is he silent because he knows and he cares, but there's no hope? You want them to think one of those three things? They're going to think one or all of those things unless we speak and say with the deepest compassion what the Lord says to us. I am with you. We are with you. Come to us. The doors of the church are open. The gospel of life is the gospel of mercy. Come and find healing and peace. All right, we're almost time for another break, but we can take a couple of more questions, comments.
As a priest, I was wondering if you could comment on confession and what to do
yes.
when someone is confessing the abortion.
Good, okay. In the parish where I was stationed, we had an awful lot of confessions. And one of the reasons was we preached about it a lot. And we heard confessions after the Saturday evening masses. Great time. People were there in church already, so they figured, okay, we'll go to confession. And I found as a pretty reliable pattern that the biggest, longest confessions, although I told people, even though they've been away, they might have been away for 30 years, your confession doesn't have to take more than 6 minutes. They say, oh, I'm going to be in there for an hour. No, you're not. It doesn't have to take more than 6 minutes. But the biggest ones are at the end of the line. The end of the line. One of the reasons is they do think they're going to be in there for an hour, though, so they tell everybody else in the line, you go ahead of me, go ahead of me. I'm going to be last because I'm going to take a long time. I don't want you to wait. Sometimes they'll say it to people. Let the rest of them all go in. The other reason they're at the end of the line is ambivalence. Do I really want to go in there? I'm not so sure. I'll sit here and think about it for a while. I'll let them all finish. And it was a consistent, reliable, and of course you're more tired at the end. I mean, we would have confession lines for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Oh, now I'm getting hungry. And here she comes, Been away for 30 years, all right. And then if she's going to confess abortion, very often she won't be able to say the word. So, well, Father, is there something I'll have to confess today? I don't even know how to say it. The worst thing I've done. She may start crying. But then she'll eventually say it in one way or another. At that moment, obviously we want to convey to her, if she knows that the pain and the damage and the wrong that she's done, we want to convey to her that we are equally aware of her pain. Obviously, the last thing we want to do is minimize it or dismiss it. We don't say to her, oh, don't worry about it anymore. She's going to worry about it for the rest of her life. It's going to be with her for the rest of her life. We acknowledge, we convey that we appreciate the depth of this pain. Then we say to her that, the Lord is with you and with your child. He's going to forgive this sin right here, right now, because you've come to Him asking for this forgiveness. So we assure her of that. And it's good to say to her as you offer her the absolution that any penalty, any punishment connected with this sin is also being absolved, because she may have heard or she may hear in the future that connected with the sin of abortion, the church's law has an excommunication, and if she doesn't hear anything in the moment of confession that, all the penalties have been absolved, she may doubt later on whether she's really been reconciled. So, we absolve her, we say to her something like, the Lord is going to forgive you this sin and any penalties attached to it. We don't necessarily have to evaluate at that moment whether she meets all the criteria that canon law lays out for incurring an automatic excommunication. We're absolving the whole thing. But the point is that here's the key. Distinguish for her the forgiveness of the sin and the healing of the wound. the things I was just saying about the need to engage in the work of grief is that if she doesn't deal with this in an ongoing way, using tools in addition to confession to work through her post-abortion pain, she's likely to think that she is not really reconciled with God because, after all, why do I still feel so bad? And as a substitute for the grief work, she may find herself going back to confession, repeating the same sin. Now, we all know it's perfectly legitimate to reconfess a sin in order to renew our sorrow for it, to get additional grace, and perhaps to get guidance and counsel about it. But we don't do it because we don't believe that we're already forgiven. She's doing it because the ongoing pain of the wound and the ungrieved child, or what psychologists call impacted grief, is eating away at her. And she doesn't know that there are any other tools to deal with it except going back to confession. So especially if you have someone who's confessing it, who says she has confessed it before, all right, that should be a signal in your mind to say, okay, you've confessed it before. I welcome you again. You've confessed it again. Okay, that's great. That's fine. Let's talk now about the healing, because what you may want to do, and this is exactly how I would say it to her, what you will find very beneficial to do, and what's very important to do, is to be able to talk with someone about this outside of the arena of confession so that you can begin to work through the healing of this wound, so that you can properly grieve your child. There are many post-abortion healing programs. Let me recommend to you a Rachel's Vineyard Retreat, and then you can have perhaps little cards available there in the confessional for her to take. That'll have the phone number or the website. Now notice how I said it. I didn't say, come back to me, because she may be confessing anonymously and she may not want to come to you. She's confessing anonymously because she wants to be anonymous. So you say, come back to someone who can guide you through the rest of the process. We'll talk more about this in our afternoon sessions. And as we go into our break, let me point out I have my two books here, Ending Abortion, Not Just Fighting It, which is a series of essays, and Pro-Life Reflections for Every Day, which is, as the title suggests, a daily devotional that takes a scripture quote or a quote from Evangelium Vitae and has a brief reflection and prayer every day of the year, nourishing pro-life activists in their commitment. We've got copies back there. And I also have a bunch of CDs of homilies I've given on EWTN, which, of course, address the readings, but which always, in one way or another, bring out the theme of pro-life. So please take advantage of all that material. And you'll see those yellow cards on the table. If you want to begin filling those out, we'll talk more about those this afternoon as well, as a method of us to keep in touch with one another. So I guess we resume after lunch. The schedule says lunch at noon, and I guess our third presentation is at 1:30. So thanks for your attention. I look forward to interacting with you the rest of the day. God bless you.